Have you noticed your money shrinking? The groceries that once felt affordable now seem to rise in price every time you shop. Rent creeps upward, tightening your monthly budget. Even a simple morning coffee costs more than it did not long ago. That slow pressure, that nearly invisible force shaping your daily choices, is inflation. And today, we're going to break it open in the clearest, most human way possible. Inflation means one thing. Prices rise and your money buys less. A euro today will not stretch as far next year. It seems small at first, just a few cents here and there, but over time, the impact grows. Inflation doesn't appear randomly. It emerges from several powerful forces. The first force is demand-pull inflation. This happens when many people want the same product at the same time, but supply can't keep up. Think of a bakery that suddenly becomes famous online. Crowds rush in, but the number of ovens stays the same. Too many buyers chasing too few goods pushes prices upward.
The second force is cost-push inflation. This occurs when the cost of producing goods rises. Fuel becomes expensive, raw materials jump in price, electricity bills surge. When production costs climb, businesses must raise prices simply to survive. The third force is monetary inflation. When more money enters the economy than the economy can support, each euro loses a bit of value. It is gradual and quiet, but its effects accumulate year after year. To see how inflation affects real life, meet Anna. She owns a small cafe. Last year, a croissant cost €2.20. Today, it's $2.45. Her flour costs rose, electricity nearly doubled, and coffee beans jumped in price. Anna isn't trying to get rich. She's trying to keep her business alive. Inflation squeezes her and her customers at the same time. Here's the tricky part. Inflation can feed on itself. When people expect prices to rise, workers demand higher wages. Businesses raise prices early, and customers rush to buy before costs climb again.
This creates a feedback loop, a cycle that accelerates inflation. A small spark can grow into a wildfire if expectations take over. Inflation also shapes emotions and behavior. People become cautious, nervous about the future, and more protective of their income. Families delay purchases, hoping prices might fall. Businesses hesitate on investments, unsure of what tomorrow will bring. Even small changes in prices can ripple through an entire community, altering habits and expectations. That's why understanding inflation matters. It is not just an economic concept. It is a force that affects daily decisions, long-term plans, and the sense of stability people depend on. When you recognize how inflation works, you begin to see the patterns behind rising costs. You notice how supply, demand, and money flow interact. And most importantly, you gain the power to respond instead of simply reacting. Knowledge turns uncertainty into clarity.
Now that we've explored what inflation is and why it happens, it's time to move behind the scenes and see who works constantly to keep it under control. Inflation doesn't just influence the price of groceries or rent. It shapes national decisions, global markets, and the strategies of powerful financial institutions. The main organizations responsible for managing inflation are central banks, such as the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, and the U.S. Federal Reserve. Their missions sound simple: keep inflation stable. But in reality, achieving that stability is extraordinarily complex. When inflation stays near 2%, economies grow steadily. People can plan their finances, and businesses gain confidence. When inflation swings too high or too low, uncertainty takes over. To keep the economy balanced, central banks use two primary tools. The first tool is adjusting interest rates. When inflation rises too quickly, central banks raise rates. Higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive. Mortgages cost more, business loans become harder to manage, and credit tightens.
As borrowing slows, spending decreases, and inflation begins to cool down. The second tool is controlling the money supply. When central banks reduce the amount of money circulating in the economy, each euro or dollar becomes slightly stronger. Less excess money means less upward pressure on prices. But reducing the money supply too aggressively can slow the economy sharply, so the process must be handled with care. This creates a major challenge. If central banks react too slowly, inflation can gain momentum and spiral. But if they move too aggressively, they risk triggering a recession. Every decision they make is a careful balancing act between stability and disruption. You may have felt inflation more intensely in recent years because several global forces collided. During the pandemic, supply chains broke, factories closed, and shipping delays stacked up. Energy prices surged, making basic necessities more expensive.
Governments released massive stimulus packages to protect jobs, adding more money into the system, and people began expecting higher prices, which only fueled inflation further. Even though you cannot control inflation directly, you can protect yourself from its impact. Avoid keeping all your savings in cash because inflation steadily erodes its value. Learn the basics of investing, even with small amounts. Track your spending carefully, especially on essentials like food, transport, and energy. Try to build multiple income streams if possible, and stay informed because economic conditions can shift quickly. Inflation is not just a number in a report. It is a force that shapes your rent, your savings, your future, and your sense of stability. But once you understand how it works, you become better prepared to navigate whatever comes next. Knowledge gives you the ability to anticipate changes instead of being surprised by them. The more you understand how central banks react, how markets shift, and how prices move, the more control you gain over your own financial future.
Another key force shaping modern inflation is the way the entire world has become tightly connected. Events that once stayed local now send shockwaves across continents. A factory shutdown in East Asia can raise prices in Europe within weeks. A drought in South America can push food costs higher everywhere. Even a brief disruption in global shipping can delay essential goods, creating shortages that quickly drive prices upward. Inflation today is influenced not only by local policies, but by a web of international pressures that move faster than ever. Technology plays its own complicated role. In normal times, innovation and automation help keep production efficient and costs low. But when critical components such as microchips or rare metals become scarce, technology itself becomes a bottleneck. One missing part can stop an entire supply chain, and suddenly everyday products grow more expensive simply because a single link in the system failed. For individuals, understanding these global dynamics is becoming increasingly important. The goal isn't to predict every crisis, but to recognize how quickly conditions can change. Building habits that resist inflation, consistent investing, reducing high-interest debt, and diversifying income creates a personal buffer against uncertainty. Inflation reminds us that economic stability is fragile, but with awareness and smart planning, you can stay in control even when the world feels unpredictable.